You know, I guess so. This would have been a few years ago as well. I mean, that's probably like a year into, maybe not even, maybe just like 6 months into kind of getting into this whole thing. And I was elk hunting, uh, archery in Colorado, and when I say we were in a remote place, I mean like real remote. We drove probably, I don't know, 40 miles from the nearest town, and we got to a trailhead, and then we took horses up that trailhead about 13 miles, I think it was. So we were out there, like really, really out there. No cell phone reception, nothing type of thing. I mean, I would wager some of the areas we went, and this was a guided hunt. Still, our guides were very frequent in this area, but some of the areas we went, I guarantee you, not another human being has stepped foot ever type of thing. Some, sure, yeah, we went to some of their, common hunting spots, but a few
Wow,
others
man.
were very much off location. And so what you do with elk hunting is you kind of find a clearing, if you will, whether it's a water source or just like a little meadow or something like that. You try to call them in. So we would position ourselves in different areas. It was myself and a buddy. We were the hunters, so two hunts, and we had two guides, and a couple of days we actually had three guides with us because this was very early season, so they were, you know, kind of get warmed up for their prime time season, if you will.
Okay.
So we they would kind of strategically place us around these areas and try to call them in, so we would have shots at them, right, with your bows, because bow hunting again is a very tactical type of hunting. I mean, it's a lot of luck, but it's a lot of being in the right position. So we had done this a number of times. I mean, I think this was on like day 3 or 4 into the hunt, and we were sitting around a well, I shouldn't say sitting around, but we found like a little clearing in the woods, and I would say imagine like an oval, if you will. It was probably 20, 25 meters wide, probably 50 meters long. They had me go up on the left. This is my left. They had me go up on the left side of this, and then my buddy went up on the right side. So we were about 50 meters apart. Uh, the two guides, we had two guides with us that day, and they were both closer to my buddy. So there were probably, I would say, at least 30 yards in between myself and them, and they were
Okay.
over here. Okay, so I'm sitting up in this group of like evergreen trees, and I'm kind of ducked down, all camoed up and the whole bit. I mean, there's nothing with our vision or perception that would have known I was there. Yeah, I mean, nothing. My camo, I had, desensor, like so nothing could smell me. I rubbed, pine all over me in the morning. I was invisible to any elk or, type creatures up there. And so I'm sitting there waiting, and I can hear them calling and all that stuff. And all of a sudden I hear like these little thuds, like periodically, and at first didn't really pay much mind to it. I mean, after all, we were in the woods. I figured it was just a, I don't know, pine cone falling out of the tree or something. But it seemed to be happening a little more frequently. And so I'm kind of like looking around, like, what is falling down here? And, where we were at, the trees and the time of year, there was actually a lot of the leaves, because in Colorado, I mean, it's mostly like evergreen or pine trees, right? But there are some trees with leaves on them, but all of the trees above me, all the leaves are already gone. So,
Okay.
it's not like I was hearing leaves fall or something like that. So I'm kind of like looking around, I can't see anything. And, I can still hear them calling. So I know like the hunt is still going on. And all of a sudden, they kind of quit calling, and they had a distinct call they would use on their elk on their bugles. That was kind of a signal like, hey, let's gather up. So you kind of knew what to listen for. Well, um, I heard that, so I kind of started climbing out of my position, and I was tucked away in some like thick woods, right? I mean, I had an open shot, but I was very much kind of in this dense area. So I kind of had to climb out of there a little bit. And so I'm doing that, and all of a sudden I can hear these thuds going on more and more and more, and they start to sound a little bit louder. Well, just then I look up, and I can still see it in my head today, but there's probably a log, and I say log, but I mean, imagine just like a thick stick, if you will, probably about this big. I mean, probably a foot, foot and a half long. Um, and I can still to this day, I can see it falling out of the sky towards me. And I'm thinking to myself,
What?
where did this come from? That certainly didn't come from those trees over there. It certainly didn't come from these trees here. I mean, it's like I could almost see like the arch of it as it was thrown at me. And it came from, so if I'm here, all those other guys over here, it came from like here. So it was on my side, but I would say it was like probably like in a straight line away from me, but off into the woods a little bit to where I couldn't see. And I just thought that was the strangest thing, man. I mean, something was throwing things at me without a doubt. It, at first you could say, "Oh,
I
pine
mean,
cones,
when
nuts."
was it like,
Oh
thick?
yeah, like that. Yep.
I mean,
Yes.
so like thicker than a hydro flask water bottle. I mean, did
Yep.
it come close to hitting you? Did you have to duck or anything?
I
Or
wouldn't say I had to duck. I mean, it probably landed a few feet away from me.
I mean, that
If
would have
I had
scared
to.
the shit out of me. You would have felt like you were being attacked, I'm sure.
Yes. Well, so much so that when I finally got out of where I was at and we regrouped, the first thing I said to the guides and stuff was, "Hey, were you guys throwing stuff at me?" And they all kind of looked at me like, "What are you talking about?" We were way over here. I mean, from the distance they were at and the trees we were in, they couldn't have even thrown something at me if they wanted to. I mean, it was that far away and the angles weren't right type of thing. So yeah, I mean, that was a strange occurrence, and I kind of jokingly said to the main guide, because with elk hunting, you get out real early in the morning, you hunt all morning, and then from we'll say 10:30 to 3, you just kind of put your pack on the ground, take a nap, eat some food wherever you're at. It's you get some downtime in there, but during that time, he kind of tell us some hunting stories and stuff like that. And super great guy, interesting to talk to. And just kind of he and I talking, and I said, going back to that, what else could that have been besides like a Sasquatch throwing something at me? And he just kind of chuckled and did what he didn't elaborate on it type of thing, but he didn't shut it down either. Which kind of
Right.
led me to believe like he's spent his whole life. I mean, he's been guiding these hunts since he was like 12 years old. No joke. I mean, and he's at that time he was probably mid 40s, I guess. So he's spent some time out in the
He's
woods. And
probably not too skeptical because he's
no,
probably seen
I
some
can't
weird
imagine.
stuff, you
Yep.
know?
Yeah.
Um,
So that was pretty cool
I'm sure that was like
that
an
that
eerie
happened.
feeling the rest of the trip.
Oh, it totally was, man. Yeah. And like I said, I mean, I'm telling you, with the camo and stuff I wear and where I was sitting, I don't think even if there was randomly another human being out in the woods, I don't think they could have seen me. I mean, head to toe camo, sitting down like in between some, down trees. There's no way you could see me. Hell, I probably couldn't even see me there. So uh, something saw me though, or knew I was there.
Well, and no animal throws something.
No,
Like even grizzly
no,
bears don't do that, you
no.
know?
Yeah. So that was kind of that was the moment where I was like, all right, there's something to this. And when I lived in Colorado, there's a little college in the town I lived in, and every year they have like a Bigfoot, what do you want to call it, uh, event, I guess. And people come in and tell their stories, and they kind of just have presentations and stuff like that. And when I lived there, I just kind of laughed it off, like, oh, no big deal. But now I'm looking at it a little differently. And actually, I have one other story. Since I have two more really that involve me personally. So when I lived in Colorado, in like early May, so it's warming up, but there's still a lot of snow up on the mountains, especially up at high altitude. I One weekend I climbed Mount Elbert up there, which is I think it's the tallest peak in the lower 48.
And you
So it's
lived in
very tall.
Leadville, right?
Yeah, I lived in Leadville. Colorado, which at the time, kind of a little blue collar mountain town. It's kind of grown since. But I went up and I climbed this mountain early May. I can say based on the tracks and stuff that I was one of the very first people up there that year, without a doubt. And
Okay.
so when you get up above, like as you're coming out of the tree line and above, you're walking in snow pretty much the whole way that time of year, or at least I was. And so I could see a few sets of tracks going up the mountain. I, followed them up, got up to, I summited, about 8 o'clock in the morning. Because I think it started at like 4:30 or something like that. No, I think I started earlier than that even. But when I was coming back down, when anybody who's spent time on a mountain or in a forest, it's very easy to get disoriented in there or like,
Yeah.
kind of lose your original path of travel. So I followed these tracks back down and, you know, when I was getting back down to the tree line, there were kind of two paths of tracks that veered off. And I honestly, like when I got down to kind of where they changed, I forgot which one I came up on, but everything is going downhill. I'm going to find my way out no matter what.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
I took the path on the left, and I'm looking down at these tracks and I'm thinking to myself, these are huge tracks. I mean, I won't say I could see, a foot in them because, snow still melts even at that altitude. But that being said, I mean, these tracks are like this big. I mean, I could fit like 3 of my feet in one of these tracks. And it didn't really dawn on me too much at the time. But then as I'm following them, I'm like, where in the F are these tracks going? They are not going anywhere towards a trail. In fact, they're going way opposite of that. So I'm following them and I'm like, okay, next thing I know, I'm like, I'm clearly not on the path. I have no idea where I'm at. So I pulled up my, GPS or whatever and looked on it. I mean, I was a few hundred meters away from the trail at this point, but I knew where to go based on my GPS. And so I kind of I made my way back and I got down fine, but it's just another one of those moments when you're out there and you're like, I mean, the enormous size of these, plus they seem to be going where nobody else would go on this mountain. I don't know. This just
Yeah,
seemed
no,
like,
it's just
and yeah,
well, it's a simple little thing, but when you've had an experience where you feel like something was thrown at you, like that's a real experience because if something comes flying at you, then something threw it, you know?
yeah,
And then to also see a footprint that could potentially be a Sasquatch footprint, it kind of just starts to reinforce in your mind that it could be real.
totally.
Um, because, like, you know, if you're 7 foot tall, you're probably in the NBA. There's not very many people like that.
Exactly. Yes. No, it's just super interesting to me. I mean, all the testimonies, my personal experiences, which is trivial as they are compared to many of these testimonies, still something like you said. It just kind of reinforces it. And I there's a sound called the Ohio howl that somebody captured. I don't know, probably a number of years ago now, but it's obviously from Ohio, but you hear it and you can definitely tell it's not a wolf howling. It's not a bear. It's almost like a roar, if you will. And this last summer, I was camping out in like the northern but western part of Wisconsin, and I was in like a public campground, though. I think there was only two other campers there. I mean, it's a pretty remote place, so it doesn't get a lot of traffic, And it's there were, I will say this much, I did go by or around some towns on my way there, but they were definitely miles away from where this was at. And it very heavy forest. I mean, like dense forest everywhere. And no big deal. Camped, grilled out. I was out there by myself. The next campers closest to me were, I don't know, 75 yards away, probably. And I went to bed, probably around 9, 10 o'clock, like usual, and fell asleep, no problem. Well, I woke up at like 2:30, I think it was, in the morning. And like, like when you're camping, especially by yourself in the forest, the slightest sounds will perk your interest a
Oh
little bit.
yeah.
I mean, uh, a squirrel could be running across the ground and you're convinced that it's just like a dinosaur coming to eat you.
Yeah.
And so when I woke up, you just, I kind of always instinctively just kind of take in the sounds, and just embrace my environment. I don't embrace my environment, but from the standpoint of like, for my own well-being type of thing, just listen real quick and go back to sleep. But like way, way off in the distance, I could hear this repeated like howling. And I mean, I've heard plenty of coyotes. We do have wolves in Wisconsin and northern Wisconsin, but they're rare. I mean, I've heard a wolf howl. Definitely wasn't that. I've heard a mountain lion roar. Definitely wasn't that. And mountain lions are pretty rare in Wisconsin, like very rare. But this was going on over and over and over and over. I mean, I bet I listened to it for 45 minutes or more. And it was like way off in the distance to where it was just like pretty faint, but you could hear it.
Okay.
But over the period of that time, it was getting closer and closer and closer. Not to the point of where, I mean, like seriously, if I had to guess when I first started hearing it, I'd say it was miles away from me, type of thing.
Okay.
Because at night sound carries a little bit better just because the airwaves are kind of clean and so on. But as it kind of kept getting closer and closer and closer, it kind of got louder and louder and louder, of course. And now I'm really perked up in my tent, I mean, and I always carry a handgun or something out with me, but I mean, I'm like getting that thing out, like, is this thing going to keep coming this way, And just like that, I hear, the campers that were a ways away from me, because again, you can hear everything. I mean, I could hear their conversation from where I was at because the air was so still that night. And which, who knows, that thing could have been 10 miles away for all I know. But I could hear them talking. This same sound perked their interest as well. I
All
mean, I could
right.
hear them
Okay.
talking about it, like, what is that type of thing? And so I stayed there and listened and listened and listened, and finally it just kind of went quiet. But man, I am telling you, I've never heard a sound like that in the woods. And I mean, I've, I'm not going to say I'm crazy outdoorsman, but I've spent some time out there and I've been in remote places. Never heard anything like that before. And so, just another one of those things that you put in your pool of data and you're like,
Yep.
what was that? So, yeah, I thought it was
It,
pretty cool. I wish I could have caught it on cam or on my phone or something, but it would have never picked that sound up.
well, and a lot of people like I've spent a summer working in Philmont, which is a Boy Scout camp in New Mexico, and I worked at base camp, but there was this whole cycle of 2 days in base camp, 2 days processing your film. I was a photographer, so 2 days processing my film, and then 2 days going out into one of the camps across the mountain and taking pictures of our workers interacting with the people that
Mm-hmm.
are on their like 14-day treks.
Sure.
Um, and then you get 3 days off. And so often, and I had a bunch of friends that worked at all these different camps. So I would time it so that I'd have my 2 days out in the field and then I'd have 3 days off. So I'd usually spend 2 days, go and visit a friend at one of the camps, take pictures, spend an extra day hanging out, hike back down by myself, and then spend a day and a half, like kind of in the little town that's near
Mm-hmm.
the where I worked. But
Sure.
all summer, I'm hiking in and out of the mountains. Well, a lot of crazy stuff happened during that summer, but the rest of my life, I've done a lot of fishing and I have done pheasant hunting, um, but I haven't been out in the deep, remote wilderness. And so it's like, it's easy for someone that, I guess my point there is that if you're not somebody that's ever been in deep, remote wilderness, you can just you can easily say that it's all just ridiculous and not true. But
Yeah.
when you are out there, it's a little different, and things do kind of start to get you wondering. My
Yeah.
friend Nate and I spent the night down by the little blue river that runs behind my parents' property, and we went fishing, but we just decided to sleep there. And we didn't bring a tent. So we just had sleeping bags and a pillow, and the sleeping bag was one of those that got pretty close to just your
Uh
nose
huh.
sticking out.
Yeah.
And we both at like 3 in the morning decided to get up and pack up and hike back to my parents' house and sleep inside because we just were convinced that there were animals near us that were
Uh
going to
huh.
get us. And we were kind of like making fun of ourselves for being afraid, but it really felt like they could be dangerous animals. I mean, because it was loud and they were maybe fighting with each other. It felt like they were right next to you, but at the same time,
Yeah.
you kept telling yourself they can't be that close.
Uh
But the
huh.
sound was like right next to you,
Close enough. Yeah.
and you're right there by the water. You know, it's this
Yeah.
little river going by, and you're wondering, well, is it a coyote, or is it? I mean, worst case scenario
Yeah.
is like it's a mountain lion, but that's
Yeah.
probably like 1 in 100,000 chance or something. But
Hmm.
you just like it could be a wolf, it could be a
Yeah.
coyote, it could be a pack of raccoons. I mean, I just don't want to come across anything in the middle of the night like that,
No,
and
me
it
neither.
scares the crap out of you.
Yep. And
So
I think humans, we have a kind of a primal instinct that alerts us of certain things. There's a different feeling. I'll say this much with the things that the even minor as they were, the things I experienced, there was a certain feeling that overcame me compared to other times I've been out there. And I mean, I've done my fair share of camping, and like I said, I have been in very remote places. Man, I slept like a baby in those places because I felt good out there, But the, man, I'm telling you, you know when that something is afoot type of thing.
right,
And I'm not saying it's like a Bigfoot always. I'm just saying like,
yeah, but it was felt
your
different.
instincts were probably accurate there,
Yeah, no,
and
and
maybe it was just a wreck, some raccoons or something, but it might not have been. Especially in New
yeah,
Mexico, they got a pretty various game there. So
yeah, no,
yeah,
it's interesting that you've had three separate occasions that, like you said, it does kind of start to build your data in your mind where you're like, I'm starting to see things I've heard about actually come true. And the people that are telling those stories are the people that are out in the woods.
yeah, that's just it too. I mean, yeah, you get some stories about people who experience something, like a police officer out on patrol right outside of town or something like that, of course. But man, some of these people, hunters, outdoorsmen, people that live out there, if they're going out there and these people don't scare easily, that's their environment, Um, but when they come back and they're like, "Oh yeah, like I've hunted my whole life, I've never gone again since. It scared me that bad." I mean, you should probably listen to them. Like they're not making it up. Like what, you know, maybe one more story because I'm sure we're getting here on time, but there, I think this was in Idaho. Two hunters and they hunted this area many years, and one of them passed away. Old age type of thing,
Okay.
and basically said, "As long as I'm alive, you can't tell this story." Well, he died, and so basically, this other hunter said, and he was considerably younger than him. I think 15 years, 20 years. Um, but basically, once he died, he's like, "Yep, I can kind of do what I want with this story now." But um, so they hunted a bull. Um, so imagine, mountains here, kind of a valley scooped out in the middle. And what they would do is they had a trail. They hunted this very frequently, but there was kind of an ATV trail that went around kind of the circumference of this bull on the mountains. And they would, you know, drive up at a ways, park their vehicles or their ATVs, and then they would walk it. And what they would do is one hunter would, kind of walk like across the bull, and then they would kind of meet around in the middle type of thing. So when the hunter was walking across the bull, um, You could see them with your binoculars or your scope the whole time. I mean, there's trees and stuff there, but you could pretty well maintain sight with them. So, you know, one of the hunters is making his way, and the other guy's just watching him till he gets across, and they've got radios. And so the hunter that's monitoring this radios into his buddy. He's like, "Hey man, you might want to look out. It looks like there's a bear, not too far from your position, and so on. So the other guy's kind of thinking, okay, I better hustle up a little bit. This is not a place where you want to encounter a bear. And he couldn't really tell what it was at the moment. He could have been black bear, grizzly bear, who knows. Um, but he could see some movement out there. So he's watching it. I mean, just keeping an eye on for his buddy. And all of a sudden, I mean, he's like watching. He's like kind of getting confused because he's like, man, this thing like stood up on two legs. It's like walking around. It's huge out there. I mean, it's taller than, there's like little, the way they described it kind of reminded me of like cedar trees, which you see in Nebraska, like
Yeah.
fairly short, kind of broad and bushy. But the way they describe these trees kind of reminded me of that. And this thing was just towering over those trees. And so he monitored in and he called his buddy on the radio again. And he was like, yeah, man, I don't know what this thing is out there, but you know, get moving, basically. Like, let's get out of here, type of thing. And so he's kind of leaned up, or tucked away back in some trees as he's watching. He's just kind of like laid back on the trees, watching with his binoculars and so on. Well, anyway, this creature starts walking towards him, the guy that's monitoring.
Oh,
So he's kind of just like, watching as it comes in, and as it's getting closer, he's like, what is this thing? I mean, it's clearly not a bear at this point. Is this a man in a ghillie suit? What's going on? So he's kind of, like I said, retreated in the trees. Well, all of a sudden, he kind of gets to a point where he's almost like hidden, if you will, because he sees this thing coming. Well, it comes up. He eventually loses sight of it because it's down in the bowl. In his perspective, he can't quite see it. But, some time goes by, and all of a sudden he can hear something walking up behind him on the ridgeline. And he is like, what the fuck is happening? He's like getting real scared at this point. Well, just like that, it kind of disappears and it's gone, doesn't hear it anymore. Everything is fine. Well, his buddy, they end up meeting up in the middle, and his buddy was like, yeah, did you know there was something above you on the ridgeline there when you were sitting there? And he was like, well, yeah, I kind of heard something. He was like, yeah, man, I was watching it through my binoculars and I couldn't tell you what it was. And, so they're both kind of have, different perspectives of this thing as it's making its way across the area. And, they kind of talked about it and they were real confused, but they were convinced, not a bear. They both were they've heard Bigfoot stories in the area and so on. So that's kind of honestly what they're thinking it is. So his buddy was like, yeah, when it was up there, I could see it standing up, and it went up to like this branch on that tree, and he pointed the exact tree out. So they went back to their base camp, or where, their homes basically, because they're from the area. They came out the next day with like a tape measure, and they measured up to that branch. And what did he say? I mean, it was 10 feet plus tall. Because I think it was a while ago since I heard this story, but I think what he said was, it was so tall to the branch, but this creature's head went over the branch even more. So I think it was like 10 or plus feet to the branch. So it was even taller, potentially like a 12-foot tall creature type of thing. And both of these guys, like I said, neither one of them hunted again. And the one guy was like, yeah, don't tell anybody about this as long as I'm alive. Because what's that telling you? That guy is clearly not trying to make something up because he doesn't want to go through the scrutiny of it.
right.
And, the other guy agreed to this. Neither one of them have ever hunted again. And both of these dudes, from what they were saying, were like lifelong, like live to hunt type of thing. It wasn't just like something they casually do, like a way of life. And they've never done it again. And so when I hear things like that, I'm just like, what's to gain there? You know, nothing. Nothing's to gain. They lost a lot, if anything. Um, yeah, just
No, that's a
it's
great
cool, man.
story. It is. I mean, it's
Yeah,
sad for
I
them. It's really
yeah,
cool. It's really cool to hear stories like that. And it does, like, I'm already starting to believe a little bit more.
yeah,
Because for me, it's always been about the fun, just the funness of it.
sure.
But I
Like the
am very,
mystery, right? Yeah,
yeah, the mystery, the what if, but I'm very skeptical. But
sure,
I haven't taken the time to hear the firsthand account stories, and I think if I did that, maybe I would have a different opinion. But I do believe that like I believe in people's actions, and your typical person that likes to hunt, like I'll go with my grandpa. I'm not going to take my kids hunting because it's not a passion of mine, like,
sure.
but I like to spend time with my grandpa. If you're somebody
Yeah,
that
I get that.
like coordinates hunting and goes and you go in this path and I'll watch you with binoculars, like that's not your first trip hunting. You probably
Yeah,
have, you know what you're doing, you have a strategy, you're out there with a friend that also knows what they're doing. Those type of people don't typically stop hunting,
yeah,
because they're really into it. Like
yep,
everybody has their hobby, and if that's what something you're actually doing, you're probably really into it. You've
hmm,
probably bought and spent a lot of money on equipment. You kind of live
yeah,
for it.
yeah.
You wait. It's like fantasy football. I'm waiting for that time of year every year. Like if you're a
Exactly, dude.
bowman, it's like when the hunting season starts and stops, and you think about it every year.
Yeah, yep,
So if
yep,
those people just stop hunting forever because of an experience, I think that should be taken pretty seriously.
yeah. Yeah, and not to mention how many stories I've heard where these guys are, whoever doing whatever they're doing out in the woods, camping, hunting, fishing, you name it, and they'll have these occurrences and they leave all their stuff out there. You're talking some of thousands of dollars of stuff, and you don't just leave that because it's convenient. You leave that out of fear, So
Right.
if you're willing to just like dodge, duck, and get the heck out of there, yeah, I mean, I think that alone says a lot, and some of these people report too, oh yeah, I did go back out there. I went out, maybe a month later or something like that. My camp was just destroyed. Like not like, some raccoons went through it and were looking for garbage and food, like destroyed, things thrown everywhere, tents ripped up, I mean, it paints this picture of something with intelligence that didn't want you to be there. And I think that's the lesson. And that's why I say, I mean, these places, that's, our realm, our habitat is in cities. Yeah, people live in the woods and stuff like that, but we live in a civilized fashion. These things, they don't. They are creatures of the woods and by the woods, so
Yeah.
that's their area. And then people are like, well, how come you never hear them coming? Or how come you never find a body? Yeah, you know what? I've seen a full grown elk with antlers this big walk through trees this wide and never heard a sound out of them. I mean, when you're a creature of the forest, you know how to navigate the forest. And as far as
Yeah,
finding a
no, for
body,
real.
yeah, and as far as finding a body, I mean, as much time as I've spent in the woods, which again, many people have spent way more than me, no doubt, but I've never seen a bear carcass, a mountain lion carcass. I've only seen, gosh, I could not tell you one time I saw like a naturally dead deer carcass out there. You know, yeah, I've seen maybe a deer that was shot and ran off, and the hunter, couldn't track it down type of thing. Clearly, it was shot and it died. Yeah, I've seen that maybe a time or two, but I've never seen something just laying there dead. My point being, the forest or the woods, the mountains, whatever. I mean, they that environment swallows up whatever's living there or dying there. I
Yeah.
mean, I just find that to be a ridiculous argument. That, oh, I've never seen a body of one. Yeah, no shit. Nobody, man. That guide I was with who spent his whole life out there. He's never seen a body of a moose, an elk, any of these creatures. I mean, I think that says a lot. It's far more mysterious out there than what we would give it credit for. And I don't think like there's
I
other
believe
stuff
that
out there
completely.
besides Bigfoot too. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, thank you so much for coming on here, man. I feel like we're way over. I hope you're okay with
oh
that.
yeah, I'm good, dude. I could talk on this stuff all day.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, if you're
um,
good, I'm good.
no, no, I'm absolutely fine. I appreciate it so much. I hope you had fun.
Yeah,
Definitely would love to have you back. And yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and end this one. But thank you again so much.
yeah, man. Thank you. Great to be on the show for sure. Let's do it
Awesome.
again.
Heck yeah.